In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. Naomi was once a woman of joy, embraced by her community in Bethlehem, but the shadows of loss envelop her now as she returns with Ruth, her Moabite daughter-in-law, after a decade fraught with sorrow. They journeyed from Moab, where Naomi had sought refuge and found love in years past. The land of her youth still whispered promises of sustenance and divine providence, now that famine had lifted, calling her home. Clad in the tattered remnants of her grief, she was weary yet resolute. Ruth, a beacon of unwavering loyalty, walked beside her, their lives intertwined under the watchful gaze of the Almighty. As they approached the gates of Bethlehem, the bustling life of the town resonated like an ancient hymn, yet whispers laced the air. "Is this Naomi?" the townsfolk murmured, their voices a blend of disbelief and remembrance. The radiant woman they once knew had transformed into a specter of sorrow. Naomi's heart throbbed with the weight of her reality. "Call me Mara," she replied, for the Lord had dealt bitterly with her. Once filled with abundance, she returned empty, a stark testament of the life that had been stripped from her by tragedy. With the necessity of survival pulling at the edges of her spirit, Naomi urged Ruth to glean in the fields a practice rooted in the very heart of God's law. Ruth, emboldened by her commitment not only to Naomi but to the God of Israel, ventured into the fields of Boaz. Unbeknownst to her, this was the soil where the divine plan was set to unfurl. Each kernel of grain she gathered became an act of faith, a yearning to belong to the covenant community that had been Naomi's life. Boaz, a man of wealth and kindness, observed Ruth's tenacity. He soon learned of her devotion to Naomi, understanding she was not merely collecting grain but seeking a place in the arms of the God who had carried his people through the desert. He extended his protection, commanding his workers not to harm her, inviting her to partake in the meal among the others, offering her a glimmer of belonging in a world that often discarded widows like shadows at dusk. Ruth's arms soon overflowed with grain, a tangible sign of God's mercies once more meeting Naomi. In the stillness of night, hope flickered in Naomi's heart, awakening the memories of faithfulness long obscured by despair. Could it be that God was weaving a new tapestry from their sorrow? As days turned to weeks, a bold idea surged within Naomi. She knew the ways of their people and spoke of a kinsman redeemer, a divine provision for those in need. "Go to Boaz," she urged Ruth, directing her to the threshing floor under the cloak of night. There, as Ruth sought his protection, she also laid bare the vulnerability of her heart, revealing not just desperation but a tapestry of trust interwoven with the divine purposes of God. But the atmosphere thickened with anticipation. Would Boaz rise to the challenge of redemption? Would the weight of Naomi's past shatter under the gravity of renewed hope? The questions lingered, echoing through the quiet of the night, as they sought refuge amidst the uncertainties of life, caught in the delicate threads of God's unfolding story. Before we continue with this incredible biblical account, I want to make sure you don't miss any of these powerful scripture stories. Click the bell icon and select All Notifications. These biblical narratives have transformed countless lives throughout history. If God's word through this story is blessing you, please like and share with someone who needs to hear about God's faithfulness today. Tell me in the comments, which biblical story has most impacted your faith journey? I'm always amazed how God's word speaks to hearts across generations. Now let's continue with what the Lord did next. As the stars twinkled overhead, hopes and fears collided in a sacred pause. The dust of the threshing floor, bearing witness to the unfolding drama, held the promise of God's redemptive plan. Would Naomi's yearning for refuge turn into something miraculous? With eyes set on divine providence, the questions lingered, awaited answers that could reshape their destiny forever. Naomi's heart, once cloaked in bitterness, now beat anew, echoing a faith that dared to believe in the gifts of God's abundant grace. The divine threads of hope and restoration intertwined their fates, beckoning the dawn of a new chapter yet to be revealed. As the night deepened, the air was still, filled with a reverent apprehension. Ruth approached the threshing floor, her footsteps quiet yet resolute. The moonlight bathed the scene in silver, illuminating her path as she stepped cautiously into the shadowy corners of destiny. With a heart palpitating in both fear and faith, she remembered Naomi's words, "Uncover his feet and lie down." With trembling hands, she did as instructed, laying herself at the feet of Boaz, the guardian of hope. In the stillness that followed, she felt the weight of her vulnerability. Just as the stars shone brightly above, her heart dared to shine with expectation. There was a moment of silence, then Boaz stirred, sensing a presence near him. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice resonating through the quiet of the night. "I am Ruth, your servant," she replied, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. "Spread your cloak over your servant, for you are a redeemer." At that, Boaz shifted, his heart drawn to this foreign woman's boldness and faith. "May the Lord bless you, my daughter. You have shown more kindness now than in your youth, for you have not sought after the young men, whether rich or poor. And now, do not be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask." Hope surged through Ruth as she listened to his words, a sweet balm for her longing spirit. Boaz would not shy away from the responsibility that lay before him. Yet Boaz paused, a weight upon him. "There is a kinsman nearer than I. He must have the first claim to redeem," he warned, reminding both Ruth and himself of the laws that governed their people. "But I trust in the Lord's plan," Ruth responded, her eyes reflecting the glimmer of the moon. "If it is your heart that binds our fates, let it be done." The sun began to hint at dawn, casting a soft light over the world as Boaz contemplated the unfolding tale before him. Not just for himself and Ruth, but for Naomi as well. Each decision carried a weight far greater than personal desire. It entwined with a legacy of faith, anchored in the promises made to the ancestors of Israel. "I will go to the gate at morning light," Boaz vowed. "We will resolve this matter, and if it is not for me, then I will give the right to the one who is closer than I. Rest now until the daybreak." Ruth stayed, comforted by his words, and a serene peace enveloped her. Meanwhile, Naomi awaited word in silence. Each hour stretched like an eternity as she remained cloaked in the hope unfulfilled. Her heart wrestled between doubt and expectation. Would the plan unfold according to God's will? As the morning sun touched the earth, lighting paths of promise, Boaz strode with purpose to the city gate. There, he found the kinsman redeemer sitting, summoned by divine providence. "Come, friend," he said, "come sit and deliberate with me." As they settled, Boaz spoke of land that belonged to Naomi's family. "Would you redeem the land?" he asked, knowing if the response was favorable, it could be the key to a greater legacy. The man was eager, but Boaz soon added, "But first, you must understand that in redeeming the property, you also redeem Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Elimelech, to perpetuate the name of the deceased in his inheritance." The kinsman's face changed, the words carrying the weight of heritage and obligation. "I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance," he replied, the truth evident. In this, God's sovereign hand shaped the moment, and Boaz found his path made clear. And so, under the guise of the sun's rising light, the glorious tapestry of redemption began to weave itself, transforming bitterness into joy, loss into legacy. But little did they know that even now, in these unfolding events, the sovereign plan of God would ripple beyond their lives, touching generations yet to come, unveiling the truth of his unfailing love and the glories of his covenant promises. For in this story of Ruth and Boaz, the lineage of the promise began to unfold, beckoning the hearts of those who would follow as the Lord's faithfulness stood unwavering, ready to reveal a greater hope yet hidden in the divine tapestry. As the sun rose higher, gilding the city of Bethlehem with golden hues, Boaz rose from his seat at the gate, the weight of the matter at hand pressing upon him like the mighty wind that shapes the mountains. The kinsman redeemer heeded Boaz's words intently, yet faced with the sacrifice required, his resolve faltered in the face of duty and desire. "Then, I must relinquish my right," Boaz declared, "for the Lord's purposes reign supreme." His voice resounded with strength, not merely for the land and the woman before him, but for the future he envisioned, a family that would arise from ashes and despair. At this, Boaz summoned 10 elders from the city. "Sit here," he instructed them, and they complied, seated like watchmen awaiting heralds of truth. As they gathered, the air buzzed with the anticipation of divine pronouncement. Today we stand in the presence of Yahweh and these witnesses, Boaz began, drawing strength from the sacred covenant that defined their people. You have heard the fate of Naomi and her family. My intent is to redeem the land of Elimelech and with it, Ruth, the Moabite, that the name of the deceased may not be cut off. His heart swelled at the words, reverberating with the echoes of love layered in sacrifice. The kinsman's face, once eager, now showed conflict. If I redeem the land, I must also accept the burden of Ruth, and my inheritance will no longer remain mine. He tilted his head, contemplating the heaviness of the covenant. Yeah, the elders murmured amongst themselves, recognizing the gravity of the decision weighing upon this man. Would he forfeit the chance of a legacy, should the Lord's will fall on Boaz instead? The man took a breath, the air filled with a divine tension. I cannot redeem it, he replied at last, an undercurrent of regret lacing his voice. You are free to marry her. A hush fell over the gathering, as each watched the hand of God weave the threads of destiny through the fabric of their community. Boaz turned to the elders, the solemnity of the moment shining in his eyes. You are witnesses today, he proclaimed, that I have bought all that belonged to Elimelech. The elders affirmed in their hearts as they spoke, we are witnesses. With those words, he grasped the mantle of covenant hope that was laden with promise. Yet even as the transaction echoed through the valley, Ruth awaited in quiet faith, resting in the providence of the Lord. As the hours passed, she prayed silently, her spirit echoing the longing of her heart, may your will be done, O Lord. Your plan is higher than our own. And so, it was at the city gate, the hands of the faithful wove a new narrative that would shift the course of Israel's destiny. The elders declared blessings upon Boaz, saying, May the Lord make the woman who is coming to your house like Rachel and Leah, who built the house of Israel. Joy intertwined with sorrow, and a flicker of heaven ignited the hearts of all present, for they knew that this union held a greater significance than mere earthly bonds, it signified restoration, legacy, and the unfolding of divine purposes. With their spoken blessings, they sealed the beginning of a hope that would resonate through ages. Yet unbeknownst to them all, another layer lay beneath this moment, a shadow of promise, as the greatest Redeemer stood on the horizon of time. For through Ruth and Boaz, God's sovereign plan was not merely to restore a family in Bethlehem but to birth a lineage that would eventually embrace nations, a lineage that would lead to Christ himself, unveiling the most profound mystery of redemption known to all. And thus, God's providence whispered softly through those burgeoning generations, beckoning all to seek not just land and relationships, but the true sanctuary found in him alone. The elders, filled with joy, proclaimed blessings upon Boaz. May your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. May you prosper in all that you do. Their voices echoed in agreement, a chorus of hope lifting to the heavens, as unseen forces stirred in the spiritual realm. As the day unfolded, Ruth, unaware of the moments being sealed at the gate, continued to gather grain in the fields. Each stalk she collected resonated with the sound of hope, a promise yet fulfilled, as her heart mirrored the very essence of the loving kindness she had chosen to embrace. Her fingers grazed the golden wheat, vibrant and ripe, a symbol of divine provision. Boaz returned to his land, the joyful shouts of the elders ringing in his ears. He kneeled then, a humble servant before the Lord, and spoke fervently in prayer. O Lord, who watches over the broken-hearted, may thy will safeguard Ruth. I accept this covenant, this mantle, and pledge my life to her as your vessel of grace. The earthy fragrance of the fields mingled with the fervent cries of his heart, signifying a union of faithful purpose ordained by God. Meanwhile, Naomi, aglow with the joy of prophecy fulfilled, waited eagerly within her humble abode. She heard the jubilant voices of the community, felt the air thick with a sense of divine promise, and her heart danced within her breast. As the door creaked open, Ruth entered, her face beaming with a beauty born of hope. The grain she carried spoke not only of sustenance but of the abundance that would follow. Naomi, Ruth exclaimed, Behold, I bring news of great joy. Boaz is our Redeemer. He shall take me as his wife. The words tumbled joyfully from her lips, and Naomi enveloped her in an embrace, tears of joy spilling down her cheeks. "Blessed be the Lord!" Naomi cried, lifting her hands in praise. "The chains of despair are broken, and we are restored. The Redeemer has come. This is the beginning of a new chapter, where love and lineage entwine." The air vibrated with a sense of divine celebration, as though heaven itself rejoiced with them. As twilight fell, Boaz approached Ruth, the air charged with warm promises, a blend of expectancy and hope. "May the Lord bless you, Ruth, for taking refuge under his wings," he spoke gently. "For you have shown kindness to your mother-in-law and to me. Together, let us build a family that honors the Lord." The stars began to twinkle in the night sky, casting their serene light upon the earth as Ruth gazed at Boaz, searching within his eyes for the truth of his words. Would he indeed become the guardian of her weary heart, the redeemer of her lineage? "Your faith has been a light in the shadow," she whispered, "and I shall walk with you in faith, trusting in our God who directs our steps." In that moment, each heart present in that humble home felt the weight of divine purpose resting upon them. A lineage was stirring that would alter the destiny of Israel and beyond. Yet, as the flame of hope flickered bright, the shadows of the future whispered of trials yet to come. Little did they know, the unfolding of God's sovereign plan would draw lines from their story to generations yet unborn, the very line that glimpses the hope of nations, a hidden blessing to be revealed. And from this union, a path was being forged, leading toward a greater Redeemer, the one who would bear the burdens of the world, uniting lost souls in his loving embrace. As the promise echoed through the ages, the time was drawing near for God's promise to unfold, as his perfect plan awaited in the tapestry of time. In the days that followed, as the sun painted hues of gold upon the fields of Bethlehem, Boaz moved with purpose. He gathered the townspeople to prepare for the union, calling forth those who had witnessed the covenant between them. With each gathering, blessings were pronounced, for they stood on the threshold of a new beginning. "Come, friends from the gates," Boaz declared, raising his voice above the murmurs of anticipation. "Today marks a union not only of Ruth and me but of faith and heritage, woven together by God's hand." His words were like a balm, touching hearts and igniting spirits, for they understood the significance of the moment. Meanwhile, Ruth prepared herself with modesty and grace. She pulled forth the finest garments from Naomi's collection, dedicating herself to the Lord's purpose. "Let me be adorned in righteousness," she prayed quietly, "and may my heart reflect your love." Each stitch became an offering, a testament of her commitment to the path laid before her. When the day of the wedding arrived, the air was filled with the fragrance of joy and celebration. Naomi, filled with delight, walked alongside Ruth. "My daughter, today is a day of great promise," she whispered, her heart brimmed with gratitude. "You are not merely marrying a man, you are entering a legacy that our God has been crafting through generations." As they approached the assembly, the crowd swelled with joyous shouts and music unto the Most High. The instruments resonated, proclaiming the goodness of the Lord, and voices lifted harmoniously, creating a divine choir. "The Lord has done great things for us," they sang, echoing the psalms of old. Boaz received Ruth with the utmost honor. "You are the embodiment of faithfulness," he spoke as their eyes met, deep emotions mingling with divine purpose, "and today I vow to protect and cherish you all the days of our lives." Under the blessings of heaven, they exchanged vows, surrounded by family and friends who celebrated the righteousness that flowed from their union. As the sun dipped below the horizon, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, a heavenly hush fell over their hearts, a silence thick with the presence of God who had guided them to this moment. But as blessings rained upon them, hidden shadows danced along the periphery. Unbeknownst to them, adversities lay in wait, threatening to challenge the very fabric of their joyous occasion. The whispers of Moab, the shadow of loss, and the uncertainty of the future loomed like a storm on the horizon. Yet, seated at the Lord's table, there was no room for fear. Ruth and Boaz held fast to their covenant, declaring, "Even when trials come, our refuge is in him who redeems. His love protects all who trust in his plan." Their faith became a radiant lighthouse, drawing forth others in search of truth. People from surrounding villages began to witness the steadfast love woven through their lives, igniting a spark of hope across the land. Yet, even as their lives entwined, an unseen thread beckoned for revelation, tugging at the hearts of those who longed to understand the greater blueprint of the Almighty. For from this sacred union, a legacy would unfold, one that would not only transform their lineage but set the stage for the arrival of a king, born unto David, who would redeem all creation. And in this divine mystery, a whisper of prophecy lingered. The time was nearing for God as promised to break forth, revealing the depth of his covenant and the glory of his everlasting kingdom. And it came to pass that as the sun set upon the joyous celebration, the hearts of Boaz and Ruth swelled with the promises spoken among them. The night was bright with stars, each one a witness to the covenant made in faith, yet in the depths of the darkness, echoes of the past began to murmur once more. In the quietude of their home, Ruth knelt and sought the Lord. "O God of our ancestors," she whispered, "guide us through the paths you have prepared. Let my heart be a vessel of your peace." The weight of her heritage, that of kinships lost and a land once home, rested heavily upon her brow. Boaz, sensing her turmoil, knelt beside her, taking her hand into his own. "Beloved," he spoke softly, a calm assurance washing over them both, "we stand upon a foundation of blessing. The Lord has granted us a future beyond our imagining. Trust in him, for he has brought us together for such a time as this." Yet amidst the tender exchange, there arose a great stillness, pierced only by the rustle of leaves. As shadows danced at the edges of their home, the figure of a man approached, cloaked in the darkness of night. It was Obed, the child promised through their union, yet still unseen. His presence heralded not merely the life to come but stirred in the heavens the destinies foretold. As the dawn broke the next day, the townspeople awoke to the sound of a new voice resounding their faith. Ruth and Boaz made haste to reveal their union's blessings unto the community. Yet within the hearts of the people, a spirit of concern began to settle. "Is this not the Moabite woman?" they murmured. "What of her past and our traditions?" Ruth felt the weight of those words, a reminder that her journey from Moab bore the scars of loss and grief. But Boaz, resolute in his love, stood firm before the assembly. "Let it be known, she has vowed her faithfulness not just to me, but to the God of Israel." His voice rang clear, filled with a conviction that reminded them of the story of Ruth, and how she had clung to Naomi, declaring, "Your people shall be my people, and your God my God." This declaration stirred the embers of faith within the townsfolk. The tales of Ruth's loyalty were spoken once again, and hope began to sprout like flowers in the spring. Yet, just as the people began to embrace them, threats loomed, rumors of a kinsman, a nearer redeemer whose own claims sat like a cloud over Ruth and Boaz. That evening, Boaz sought counsel with the elders at the city gate. "In the presence of the Lord and this assembly, I lay claim to my beloved Ruth," he declared, "yet there exists one who stands before me." The murmurs grew as all understood the stakes. A choice, a challenge, and a test of faith would soon unfold. As Boaz cast his eyes upon Ruth, a vision danced before him, a glimpse into the heart of God's redemptive plan. He sensed the weight of history upon him this moment, laden with divine purpose. "Should this near kinsman refuse to fulfill his duty, I shall not waver. I will be his redeemer, for the God of Israel has led us to this destiny." And so, the wheels of destiny turned, ushered forth by divine hands who spun favor like gold. Yet amidst the promise, what lay veiled in the folds of time was yet to be revealed, a lineage of kings and a promise of a Savior that would echo through the ages. For as they prepared to face what was to come, a whisper surged through the heavens. The promise of a Redeemer loomed nearer, binding their hearts to a legacy that was drawn from ancient prophecy. "Prepare yourselves," it seemed to say, "for the time has come for God's promise to be unveiled, and those who are faithful shall witness his wonders unfold." And it came to pass, with the dawn's gentle light spilling over the hills of Bethlehem, that Ruth and Boaz found themselves anew in the midst of this divine challenge. The town square thrummed with the early stirrings of life as whispers of the day's impending judgment floated among the people. Boaz, his heart anchored in faith, gathered the elders at the city gate, knowing that here lay the fulcrum of their destiny. "Gather unto me," he called, his voice resounding with authority and tenderness. The men approached, their faces etched with concern and curiosity, for they understood the gravity of this matter, the claim of the nearer kinsman upon Ruth. "Brothers," Boaz began, "the law of Moses presents us with duty and honor. But do not let your hearts be troubled, for we stand here as vessels of God's will. Who among us would forsake the lineage of our forefathers and allow the hand of fate to slip from our grasp?" As the sun climbed higher, illuminating the faces of his audience, Boaz laid out the situation with clarity. "Naomi, the widow of Elimelech, has returned to us, and I seek to redeem her family name by marrying Ruth, her daughter-in-law. Yet, the law demands of us the nearest kinsman, one who bears the right before me." A silence fell, the weight of divine destiny heavy upon them. The elders exchanged glances, their minds turning with the implications of this revelation. "Shall we call upon this man, that we might see his heart?" one elder finally asked, and Boaz nodded, resolved. Soon, the nearer kinsman approached, unaware of the urgency that enveloped them like a shroud. He bore the weight of tradition upon his shoulders but would soon be faced with the weight of choice. "Come forward," Boaz declared, "for the matter of Elimelech calls us to act." The man stepped closer, intrigued yet cautious, as Boaz laid before him the inheritance set before them. "The land of Naomi awaits a redeemer, and thus shall you accept the burden to restore it and her lineage. What say you, my brother?" Boaz pressed, eyes gleaming with expectation. "I will redeem it," the kinsman spoke, to the shock of Boaz, who then quickly added, "But there is more than land to redeem, there lies Ruth, the Moabite, who comes with the inheritance. Shall you take her as your wife?" A tremor of uncertainty crossed the man's face, for the complexities of such union leapt at him like a tempest. "I am unable to redeem both," he rebuffed, sensing the cost of such an act, and Boaz seized the moment. "Then I shall claim her, for the Lord's favor rests upon this union." With those words, the covenants drawn in heaven began to resound upon the earth, as the townspeople witnessed the shift of destiny. Among the crowd, murmurs of awe and reverence rose, as the implications of Boaz's declaration unfolded like the petals of blooming flowers. Suddenly, the clarity of God's plan cut through the air. This moment was not merely about Ruth and Boaz, but about the lineage of Jesse and, ultimately, David. The elders sighed in recognition of a greater purpose, the threads of the tapestry weaving into his holy narrative. And as Ruth stood by Boaz's side, the echoes of God's promises whispered through her soul, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Thus, they returned to their home, the promise of a lineage looming like the dawn upon the horizon. Yet, there remained a lingering mystery, the divine spark that ignited the spirit of the faithful and birthed Obed, the grandfather of kings who would bring forth the lineage unto the Savior. As they embraced the unfolding of God's sovereign plan, a holy anticipation filled the air, resonating in their hearts. What other wonders await as the lineage of promise spins forth in time? Are we prepared to witness the deepening mysteries of faith? For the time shall come when God's stories interlace with our own, revealing his eternal redemption. And it came to pass, after the declarations of Boaz had settled like sweet dew upon the heads of the gathered throng, that the air was thick with the expectation of divine intervention. The elders, those wise men of the town, began to murmur among themselves, pondering the significance of Ruth, the Moabite, now intertwined in the fabric of Israel's heritage. As Boaz took Ruth's hand, a calm descended upon them, enveloped in the warmth of a gentle promise that their union would not only redeem a lost lineage but also spark a legacy steeped in faith. "Let all who witness this bond remember the Lord's providence," Boaz proclaimed. "For in this moment, we are threads woven in the tapestry of his will." Ruth, her heart brimming with gratitude, turned her gaze to Naomi, who watched with tears glistening in her eyes. The older woman, once filled with sorrow, found herself enveloped in the comfort of hope anew. "Blessed be the name of the Lord, who has not left us without a Redeemer," Naomi exclaimed, her voice trembling with reverence. In that moment, the townsfolk began to respond, their hearts stirred by the Spirit. "Let it be known, Ruth is favored." cried one woman, while another added, "And Boaz is blessed among men." The chorus rose around them, lifting their voices in unity, a sacred sound echoing through the streets of Bethlehem. As the sun waned, casting golden hues upon the earth, Boaz and Ruth prepared for their marriage, a covenant sealed in the sight of God and man. Therefore, they set forth to their dwelling, the elders following to bless their union with words of encouragement and prophecies of abundance yet to come. After their vows were exchanged, the joyous celebration echoed within the walls of their humble home. Friends and family gathered, and the wine overflowed, a true manifestation of joy shared beneath the stars, fashioned by God's loving hands. Ruth's laughter rang like silver bells, her spirit unshackled, and Boaz's heart swelled with the knowledge that he stood at the juncture of history, tasked with stewarding the Lord's promise. But as night wrapped its shroud around the land, the whispers of future challenges were also felt within the hearts of the faithful. For in that hour, the unseen forces of fate stirred restlessly, trials would come, as was known among the righteous. A stillness swept over the gathering, a reminder of the greater narrative that lay woven through their lives. Within the tapestry of God's design, the path of Ruth and Boaz would soon intersect with the trials of those who would call themselves their descendants. The shadows of doubt flitted across the threshold of their joy, but the resolve in Ruth remained unbroken, echoing the words of the Proverbs, "A woman who fears the Lord is to be praised." Thus, as shadows danced upon the walls, and the faint glow of the stars overhead cast their gentle embrace, it remained clear, their story was only beginning. For within the bounds of their happiness, God carried the whispers of destiny, the birth of Obed, whose roots would reach deep into the lineage of both David and the ultimate king, the Messiah. Marvel, therefore, came a still small voice within Ruth's heart, "For the works of my hand shall reveal wonders yet unforeseen." What is the greater plan that shall arise from your fidelity and faith? In that quiet moment, amidst the festivity and the warmth of communal love, a sense of sacred mystery beckoned them. Would their faith weather the storms to come? The echo of divine redemption loomed ever closer, intertwining the lives of men, women, and their King, wrapping them into roles only God could script. Thus the question settled in the air, ripe with divine hope: what shall unfold when the fullness of time arrives, and the purposes of God come to fruition? Are we ready to witness His manifold wisdom in our midst? And it came to pass, in the days following their union, that news spread throughout Bethlehem of the blessings upon Ruth and Boaz. The townspeople looked with favor upon them, for the hand of the Lord seemed evident in their lives. They gathered often to hear stories of the couple, the Moabite who had come to serve Naomi, and the wealthy kin who had taken her as wife, a testament of God's mercy and redemption. Yet, in the quiet hours before the dawn, as the roosters heralded the new day, Ruth awoke with a burden upon her heart, a longing for a son to bear the legacy of her devotion. She turned to Boaz, who slept peacefully beside her, and whispered a prayer unto the Lord. "O God of Israel, grant me a child, that I may be a vessel of your grace and that our lineage may flourish." Days turned to weeks, and each moment bore the weight of expectation. The harvest came, painting the fields in golden hues, and Ruth, with a heart full of faith, ventured into the work, gathering the remnants of grain left behind to nourish their home. Boaz, ever watchful and wise, recognized in her diligence the favor of God. "You shall not want," he promised, "for the Lord our God provides for the faithful." As the seasons turned, whispers of hope entwined with echoes of adversity. A famine arose in the land, shaking the very foundations of Bethlehem. Many ventured away, seeking sustenance elsewhere, but Ruth and Boaz remained, resolute in their commitment to God's covenant. "Shall we not trust in His provision?" Ruth would declare to her husband, and Boaz, with the strength of a man devoted to righteousness, would nod in agreement, affirming her faith. Then, one eve, after the day's labor in the fields, Ruth returned home with an abundance of grain a measure more than needed. Boaz gazed upon her bounty, and his heart leapt within him. "Truly, the Lord has smiled upon us," he rejoiced, gathering her into his arms, for he knew she was the embodiment of blessing. But amongst the joyful laughter, a shadow loomed, for unknown to them, the Lord was preparing a trial that would test their faith and strengthen their resolve. As word of the famine spread, so too did it stir the hearts of those who had once left the town. Many would return, seeking refuge and a glimmer of hope. Among them was a man who bore a heavy burden of sin and despair, the consequences of choices he could not escape. Days followed, and one morning a knotted voice cried out upon the entrance of the town, "Return to the Lord, for he is a refuge. Seek him while he may be found." The passerby carried with him a tale of woe that would rock the hearts of those listening. It spoke of a king who had fallen into idolatry, and how the sins of Israel had weighed heavily upon the land. As the elders gathered, a storm brewed in the spirit, threatening to engulf the hopes that had been ignited in the hearts of Boaz and Ruth. Yet amidst the rising tide of uncertainty, Boaz stood firm, "Fear not, for we are not forsaken. Our God is still sovereign, and he will execute his justice in mercy." Thus Ruth, encouraged by Boaz's words, positioned herself in the light of faith, ready to address both their needs and the needs of the returning sinners. "Let us prepare a feast," she suggested, "that we may offer them not only grain, but the hope found in Yahweh, the God who saves." And so it was determined, that in the midst of despair, Ruth and Boaz would lavish the love of God upon those who sought refuge, embodying a kindness that would resonate beyond their time. "Marvel, therefore," came the voice that accompanied Ruth's faith, "for the Lord of hosts is working even now, shaping destinies entwined with his great plan. Could it be that through your compassion, the lineage of blessing will not only continue but expand? What redemptive narrative waits to unfold as these broken souls seek shelter at your tables?" As the sun rose to usher in another day, the air was thick with anticipation, for the time of divine fulfillment was at hand. God's promise hovered over Ruth and Boaz like a watchful guardian. Their unwritten legacy was about to unfurl, one that would transcend their humble beginnings, woven delicately into the very fabric of Israel's history. In the quiet of their home, Ruth and Boaz reflected on the kindness they had extended to the weary and returning. Their hearts beat in sync with the pulse of a deeper mission to serve as instruments of God's grace amidst tragedy and yearning. "Beloved," Boaz spoke softly, "our refuge is not solely in provision, but in the steadfast love of a God who sees beyond our struggles. May our lives be a testament to his faithfulness." As whispers of their generosity spread, the people of Bethlehem began to gather at their door, drawn not only by the promise of grain but the warmth of faith that radiated from their union. With love as their foundation, they poured forth blessings upon those who were weary in spirit, calling them to partake in the abundance of God's grace. "Come, dine with us," Ruth would declare, her joy infectious. "There is enough for all in the land of promise." And it came to pass that amidst this season of giving, the long-awaited moment arrived. As the appointed time drew near, Ruth found herself pregnant, the echo of each heartbeat within her womb a testament to the divine provision bestowed upon them. Joy entwined with apprehension coursed through her as she sought the Lord in fervent prayer. "O God of my ancestors," she prayed, "I thank you for this child. May he carry the legacy of faith into the generations to come." Meanwhile, Boaz remained steadfast, standing as a shield of faith for Ruth, anchoring her amidst the tumult of uncertainty that gripped their community. "Let us prepare ourselves, my love," he said, gaze fixed upon the horizon. "The Lord's plan is unfolding, and we must trust in his everlasting goodness." Together, they gathered the townsfolk, sharing their news under the twinkling canopy of stars. "A miracle is upon us," they announced with rejoicing tones, proclaiming the gift of new life destined for greatness. The elders and people welcomed Ruth's pregnancy with awe, their hearts lifting in hope, foreseeing the lineage of promise though they did not yet grasp the totality of the divine narrative at play. Yet, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon, trials were looming, darkness threatened to overshadow their sacred joy. The same man who had once proclaimed hope was now burdened by discontent and the weight of sin. He wandered through the town, spreading turmoil instead of the gospel of salvation, stirring unrest among the people. Rumors began to swirl, and questions of loyalty arose regarding Ruth's ancestry, whispering of division within the community. But in that moment of uncertainty, God's voice resonated through Ruth's heart, a gentle reminder of who she was and whom she belonged to. "Stand firm, Ruth," it beckoned. For the chains of darkness cannot bind the promises of God. You are nestled in my sanctuary, and I will not forsake you. Ruth confronted the tumult with courage, stepping forward to the people of Bethlehem with Boaz at her side. Do not let our differences define us, she implored, her voice rising in conviction. Our God calls us to unity, to embrace one another with grace as we navigate trials together. For I am Ruth, once a foreigner but now the chosen and beloved of the Lord. As her words took flight, a spirit of restoration began to wash over those gathered. The tension ebbed with each heartfelt declaration, reminding them of the sacred bond forged through faith and love. They began to understand that in the eyes of God, choice and lineage held no claim over his redemptive grace. In that climactic moment, Ruth's presence became a beacon, illuminating the path toward reconciliation. Hearts, once hardened, began to soften under the weight of unity assembled before them. Among the crowd, the man who had spread discontent was struck to his core. A revelation began to bloom within him. Surely, I have spoken in haste, he confessed, and I see that God has made a way through his faithful servants. The community of Bethlehem erupted in shouts of affirmation and praise. Let it be known among us that love triumphs over division. We will heed the call to extend grace, just as Ruth and Boaz have. Thus, the atmosphere shifted, and the hearts of the community began to unify. The tension that once hung like a shroud dissipated as the people rejoiced together, embracing Ruth and Boaz, two souls once strangers, who had become the architects of a loving legacy that echoed through time. Yet it was not just unity that was emerging, but the promise of new life dwelling within Ruth, a tangible representation of faith, hope, and the unfathomable love of God. As months passed, the fulfillment of their longing bloomed into reality. Ruth bore a son, Obed. The town erupted in celebration, for this was not simply the birth of a child, it was a cornerstone of destiny. Blessed be the Lord! The townsfolk proclaimed, their joy resonating like a sacred choir. A new name in Israel has been born, a beacon of hope for generations to come. As Ruth cradled Obed in her arms, she was enveloped in a profound realization of God's love, a resolute faith that anchored her spirit amidst the trials and tribulations they had faced. Indeed, the Lord has not only redeemed my past but has woven a new future, brimming with purpose and promise, she declared softly. Boaz, filled with reverence, gazed at their son, the embodiment of faithfulness and the legacy of their love. This child will carry forward our story, but he will also be a conduit of God's redemptive plan still unfolding. The heart of our God is exquisite, crafting a tapestry of grace in ways we cannot yet comprehend. And with the arrival of Obed, the line of promise was firmly rooted. Their legacy was birthed not just for a family, but to embrace the nations. For from this holy lineage would emerge the King of Kings, who will reign forever in glory, the greater Redeemer sent to save humanity, Jesus the Christ, through whose sacrifice all would find their refuge. Thus, in the days of Ruth and Boaz, the divine narrative was laid, a testimony of love written in the heavens. Unity over division, faith replacing fear, and a love so potent that it called forth the greatest promise ever bestowed upon mankind. The hope of future generations danced like brilliant stars in the night, reminding all who believe that God is ever present, always working towards a glorious redemption. As the sun set over the hills of Bethlehem, the faithful remembered, passed down through many hearts, for in God's kingdom, every act of kindness sows seeds of hope, beckoning forth a legacy that reaches into eternity. Now, dear friends, as the glorious tale of Ruth and Boaz resonates with the rhythm of God's love, do not let this moment pass. You need to subscribe now to stay connected to God's word and witness his promises come alive. Leave a like now to help spread his truth through the algorithm, and comment below how this beautiful story has impacted your faith. Share instantly this divine message with at least 5 friends who need to hear God's truth. Remember, this is the moment to help spread biblical truth and transform lives through heartwarming testimonies of love and faith. Don't wait even one more second.